This is Dr. Charles Parker, and you're listening to Core Brain Journal. It's a place where I connect both fresh discoveries and interesting different perspectives from advanced mind science with the realities of real people and everyday life down on Main Street.
Well, welcome, gang. This is Dr. Charles Parker at Core Brain Journal one more time, and this is number 011. And today we have with us Dr. Karen Jacobson. This is going to be a seriously interesting conversation because Karen really deals with people who are high-level strategists, and I'm looking forward to really talking to her. So, Karen, are you ready to have a conversation?
Yes, I am. First of all, thank you for having me, and I'm actually a little tickled by the fact that we're number 11 because number 11 is the master teacher, master healer, so that is quite appropriate for our conversation.
Thank you so much. I didn't know that. So, Anne, let me just read a little bit of her bio. Anne Jacobson is a high-performance strategist, and she's going to tell us a little bit about that. She shows entrepreneurs, executives, and leaders who are at the top of their game how to stay successful while regaining balance in their personal relationships, in their health, and in their life in general. So they can actually tap into the limitless power that they have within and unlock their potential and live an extraordinary life. That is fantastic, Karen. So now that we've had that little intro, tell us a little bit about who you are on a personal level, if you will.
Where to start? There's a lot, and you know, the more I do some of these shows, the more I discover different angles of myself, which I believe is really tied into the aspect of high performance, because as people, we are multidimensional. And having the opportunity to tap into the different dimensions is something that's always been a passion of mine my entire life. So whether it was on as far as my health, or whether it was intellectually, or my community service, I've always made it a point to do my best, seek knowledge, and push higher, because part of my belief system is, you know, this is a place where we don't get a do-over. We live once. And as a teenager, I came down with something called systemic lupus. Systemic lupus, for those in the audience that may not be aware, is an autoimmune disease, which basically means that the body becomes its own enemy and it starts attacking its own tissues. Lupus is actually considered to be a terminal disease. And by miracle of how I lived my life, I was able to naturally overcome and heal completely. So my approach from that point was that I actually did, Chuck, get a do-over. And to me, when you get a do-over, you got to make it count.
That is so cool and so interesting that as soon as you started talking about that, a number of questions came to mind because this is the first time we've talked about it. Did you intuitively just follow some kind of a healthy program that was helping your immune system, or did someone actually consult with you to help you make the changes you need to make in your life?
I started off, I was in Israel at the time, and I went through 4 years of in and out of hospitals through traditional medicine. Intuitively, that was not right for me. I rebelled against it, and I fought my way. When I got out of the army in Israel, I found myself back in the States. My father was running a fitness camp, and I ended up tearing a hamstring. At that time, there was a chiropractor, a sports chiropractor, as a matter of fact, who was what we call an old-timer. It basically had the philosophy, the art, and the science all combined. And my dad flew me up to his office. I was also, by then already, I was macrobiotic. I started exercising and going out to the sun, which was exactly the opposite of what the medical doctors told me to do, because it just felt right for me to do that. So I was on a path of seeking answers on my own. I was also, at the time, I got a copy of Louise Hay's book, You Can Heal Your Life. So I was also doing emotional work.
That's
getting to the chiropractor, Chuck, is what really tied the pieces for me together, because chiropractors work with the nerve system, and that's the master healing system in the body. So that allowed all the pieces to flow like that perfect puzzle and create the change from within.
That is so interesting. I mean, you said a couple of very interesting things. I think Louise Hay's book is a remarkable book, and we'll have that in the show notes for people to access, because that book is a life changer for many people.
Definitely.
And then the chiropractor. So you then, what would be your recovery pattern after that? When did you start feeling better? What actually happened in your life after you made some of those changes?
I mean, at the time, having been in hospitals on and off, and I used to walk around, I had a butterfly rash on my face, which looked like a third-degree burn, which obviously had its social ramifications as a teenager in high school. You know, they say high school's supposed to be the best time, but I literally had people walk up to me in the street and ask me what happened to me.
Yeah.
And that carried its own challenges, that as I was doing my personal work, it took time to make those changes. But what I had noticed, that once I had specifically put the chiropractic piece together with everything else, which basically is a whole lifestyle, that's when things started falling into place. That's when I really started feeling better. That's when I started healing both physically and emotionally, literally to the extent that when I showed up at my doctor's office and we did a blood test, he's like, well, he goes, I don't get it. Everything is clean.
See, that is so interesting. And that butterfly rash, for the listeners who don't know about it, is absolutely characteristic of systemic lupus. And
Absolutely.
you see it, and boom, and that's the first thing you think of. Because there's really nothing else quite like that in medicine. I mean, you see it, and there it is. And then for you to have a healing experience like that, taking care of yourself properly, well, it really must have been transformational.
Well, it was transformational to the extent that when I understood the power of what the chiropractic piece put for me, I made the commitment and the dedication to pass that on, to pay that forward. I enrolled in chiropractic school and became a chiropractor myself, and designed a practice that was holistic like that in nature, that really worked with patients' body, mind, spirit, both mental, spiritual, emotional, and physical.
See, that is so interesting. That wasn't in your little bio that you sent me. So you're actually a closet medical person, going out there healing in your own way. You're sneaking these things into people. It's amazing, yeah. So that was really an interesting conversation we had before we came on, because I think you said some very interesting things about differentiating yourself not as a coach, but as a strategist. Could you elaborate on that, please?
As I mentioned to you, I spent 24 years as I mentioned, I was a chiropractor. I was in practice for 24 years, and my practice including helping people both on the physical level, but really I got the understanding that the physical issues were stemming from a lack of congruency in their own life. And what I mean by that is that what they expected their life to look like was really in conflict to what was happening. So it wasn't jiving, like you would say in slang. And that caused stress internally that as a result, people were breaking down both physically and emotionally. So I understood that the emotional component, the same way I had to heal my own emotional component, was something that was a key factor. So in my practice, I was coaching a lot of people. But what was different was really understanding what's in their mindset and helping them shift their thought process, rather than, giving them a formula, helping them come to their own inner truth and giving them skill sets and strategies to cope when manage with stress, to deal with difficult situations, so that it's something that they can take into the future and repeat when something similar might come up.
Well, I thought the other interesting thing that you said was that, first of all, that's very interesting in and of itself, but that's in a way kind of an endpoint of a developmental process for you, which began when you were actually back in the Israeli army in Israel. in terms of how you were conducting your life, in terms of how you were seeing the world. And then there was an evolution that took place where the intuitive you became the more cognitive you in the process.
Absolutely. When I was in the Army, realizing that in Israel, and not having been in the Army in the U.S., I don't have 100% of the comparison. But in the Army in Israel, you are actually military property. And it's very black and white. There's no room for color or gray or anything else. So I'm the type of person that any order, any command needed to make sense, needed to be logical. And there was a lot of stuff that wasn't logical. That was just because of the level of thinking that military creates. It's a system, it's a structure, it's an institution. And my personal thought process is about breaking out of boxes. So that's where I had to find my way, and I had to go internally and just feel my way around and become more in tune and quiet within myself. I was meditating, I was sitting and contemplating about things, I was writing. So I was creating a whole nother world that was separate from what happened in the military. I also had to deal with military type of communication, which was another skill set that I had developed. Understanding people's thought process and how to communicate with different types of people.
So then how did that translate? How do you take that and translate that into strategy versus coaching? Because a lot of people are interested in coaching. We've just had an interview with a coach talking about an ADD coach and how he was looking at the cognitive dimension of ADHD coaching. But you're taking it to yet another level and differentiating it out with strategic thinking. Could you explain that, please?
We all have a view of the world that we create from the time we're children. And our experiences, our values, our emotions, they're all tied in together to create that blueprint. Let me give you a little example. Take someone have you been to the Grand Canyon?
Oh, yeah.
You know how the Grand Canyons have those view scopes, those binoculars that you can see part of the Grand Canyon?
Yes.
So when you look through the binoculars, you'll see part of the canyon. So you're seeing part of the big picture.
That's right.
Now, that's your view, that's your vantage point, that's where you're standing, that's what to you the Grand Canyon would look like. 500 feet away, somebody else is standing and is looking at a different view scope. Do they see the same picture?
No. Excellent metaphor.
But it's still the same Grand Canyon.
Right.
Now, in order for you to communicate with that person effectively, what would be a good strategy for you to apply?
You're asking the question.
Absolutely.
I'm going to go over and knock on the door and talk to them and see what they're looking, see their apparatus.
Exactly. So the strategy in that would be to understand their thought process, to understand what they're seeing, to understand what they're looking at and what their view of the world is and how they operate. So you would come towards each other.
I was just going to say that, what happens in psychoanalysis, in my original training in psychoanalysis, there was always this thing of the sympathetic response versus the empathetic response. You have the trial identification with the other human being, and then you have to come back to yourself. Because if you stay over there, then you can't be of service to them because you're locked into their view of the Grand Canyon.
Absolutely. And that's why really the ideal strategy is for the two of you to meet in the middle on neutral ground and understand each other, but not necessarily have to change 100% of who you are in order to accommodate. So that's exactly what you're talking about, the difference between being sympathetic and empathetic, and to go back, understand their strategy, and come back to your center. Because the strategy is really to operate from your power center, from your own truth, with being able to see the different viewpoints and respect them.
Isn't that interesting? I mean, and so what you do then, I'm asking you, but it sounds like you're taking your perception of reality in terms of what they've expressed it, but you perceive reality a certain way. then they're perceiving reality in a certain way. You come over and join them in their reality and then do what you can to articulate a different view that is a combination of both views in some way, hoping to be helpful to them. Is that right?
Actually, I don't make any changes. What I do is I see their reality, and then I will act in the place where I'm asking them certain questions. Because let's face it, we are where we are in life, and whatever strategy we had up until today, it worked for us until it stops working. Now here's the question. Why is it that it stopped working? I don't have the answer to that. You have the answer to that. And going back to a method of what's the best learning style? Are you going to learn the best if I tell you what it is? Or if I ask you questions and you reach a new conclusion?
Interesting.
So I help you reach certain conclusions. And what's beautiful in my work, when I see clients one-on-one, and I do that on a regular basis, I'll actually ask certain questions, and it's like I can look at them and like the light bulb goes on above their head. And a very common comment, Chuck, would be like, okay, it's like you are right in my head and you know what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Because I have the ability to do that, I also have the ability to read what's not congruent between what they're saying and what their body is saying. That's where understanding body language and communication skill sets really helps me when I work with these individuals.
Okay, Karen, this is so interesting. Now take us with you to the room you're in with somebody and give us an example of how that kind of experience occurred for you so others can share that experience with you. Do you have something like that in mind?
Absolutely. So I'm sitting with a client who happened to be a very religious individual and had some health issues. And part of the health issues translated, especially if you go back to the work that Louise Hay, this is where the tie-in comes in, translated into paralyzing anger. And there was deep-seated anger and resentment that sat in their body for years and years and years and crippled them. I'm having a conversation, and the goal is, in one of the techniques that I use, it is to help them release past anger so that they can really be free from the emotion that's locking them down. So I'm in the conversation, and they're saying, well, I'm angry. Kind of like I'm looking at them like, yeah, you're saying that, but please make me believe that, because that's not really what I'm seeing. I'm seeing someone who's calm, who's control, who's actually burying their anger deep inside. And let's face it, an emotion is energy. If you do not let it out of your body, it stays in the body. Now, we've never heard of people that got sick because they were overjoyed. But we definitely know of people that get sick because of those negative emotions, because that's dark, that's negative energy, which releases toxic chemistry in our body. So that toxic chemistry will affect your adrenals, will affect you on a cellular level, and will start destroying your body, and that's how we create illness. I had to work with them and push them to the extent where really, I wasn't saying to them like, no, I believe you're angry. I said, just, okay, make me believe. And I pushed and I pushed and I pushed in a loving and gentle way, but still strong enough that they ended up breaking through and having an outburst.
So they got angry with you in the room.
They got angry with me in the room. And the biggest challenge for them was that they happened to be angry at the fact they felt that God, that they were a believer and that God failed them. And the minute that they were able to verbalize that, and we had a conversation about it, whether it was real or not, soon thereafter, they started experiencing physical changes.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah. Now, I'm going to take a moment to take a little side conversation, because in a way, this is one of the things that Freud was working on in the late 1800s, before 1900, is really the cathartic theory of mental health. You take this thing and you have these humors rolling around in your body, and then you get the humors out. Interestingly, I think what's happened oftentimes in psychiatry, people just think they're going to go around and express the feelings all the time rather than growing from them the way you're talking about. It's like, I'll feel better if I just keep getting this off my chest, instead of looking at it as an internal learning experience with a person who can really help them understand exactly what's going on with them.
Well, if you think about it this way, isn't it true that what we focus on grows?
Yeah.
What we put our energy into will grow. So if I'm going to constantly have a conversation about something that's upsetting me, where am I putting my energy?
Yeah.
So I'm giving it life. What I do when I work with a client, specifically when I use a technique called timeline therapy, it's somewhat a crossover between hypnosis and neurolinguistic programming, which is the science of how our mind and our language create programs that's really what creates that blueprint that we were talking about earlier. And it's how we model excellence. So there are people out there that have been excellent in bringing pain and mastering pain in their life because it served a purpose. Being able to release from that pain is about changing what originally caused it. So I may not have to go. Sometimes when I have a trauma, someone with a trauma in their 20s, that may not be their original cause, because most of the causes are 0 to 7. That's the time when we're a sponge, when our subconscious mind absorbs everything and creates patterns, creates beliefs, and is there to protect us. So if, as an example, I take somebody who constantly had bad relationships and she has dated older men, and, we're looking, oh yeah, she had a dad complex, and because the parents got divorced, yes, that's one level. But the next level to create the change is not about understanding it consciously. It's about understanding what the truth was, that when mom and dad got divorced, the truth was you were just a child and you had nothing to do with it, and mom and dad still loved you the same way. And when your subconscious mind can change that story and look at it from the point of view of an adult, now you change all the events in your life, and it's quick, it's instant. One of my clients, one of the things that she said, she goes, what amazes me, I can come in here and by the end of an hour, I'm different, I'm changed.
See, that's marvelous. I think it's very interesting. And by the way, before I forget it, I want listeners to know that Karen is sharing a PDF that's going to be available in the show notes. So if you're listening to this, go over to the show notes and hit 011 download, corebrainjournal.com/011 download, and you'll be able to pick up Karen's PDF on this very subject. I'm wondering why you're talking, Karen, about the relationship between this kind of activity and EMDR. Where are you with an EMDR practice?
So I use timeline, and again, EMDR is one type of practice. In chiropractic, one of the techniques that I learned while I was in practice was neuroemotional technique. Our body is going to react in different ways to different experiences. So when EMDR, when you're studying the eye movement and how it's affecting you, especially with traumas, for me, I utilize timeline therapy for those events, especially with people with PTS, with anxiety, people that have anger or shame issues. And what I like about that technique is that not only it's subtle, it's quick. I mean, we can break through in sessions in an hour, break through and completely change someone's blueprint on several emotions. There's 5 major emotions that we deal with, which is anger, sadness, fear, hurt, and guilt. And there will be secondary, but those are like the 5 big ones that will also cause the major health issues. The sadness and the hurt are things that cause heart disease. The guilt can cause people things like digestive issues or not the ulcers or cancer, things that are eating you up. And that's the power of those type of emotions that affect and destroy the body. What I like about it is that, again, as the strategist, as someone, I'm really acting only as the catalyst and as the navigator. So what I'm doing is I'm helping you achieve your truth without interfering. What I have to do at the same time is just manage the fact that when I'm watching your body and I'm watching your physical reactions, to know that if we're dealing with hard emotions and trauma, that you won't sink into them.
So that is the difference right there between strategic reassessment of what's been going on in coaching right there, because coaching does take a more active directive. This is what you should do in these circumstances. And you're saying, I don't even know what that is for you. You're saying you will know what that is for you if you release some of these, for want of a better word, contagions that have been trampling around in your brain for years.
Right. It would be the negative emotion. It would be limiting beliefs. It would be one of the things that I like about the work that I do. It really isn't directing them. What I would say, the little boundary that we keep is that when I work with someone, it's really important, and I set that as a guideline, that as long as we're working together, and the result, the outcome, should be something that is good and healthy for you, that is good and healthy for your family, that is good and healthy for your community, and that is good and healthy for the environment. That means, in other words, it's ecological. It's really for the benefit of everyone.
That is a beautiful thought, isn't it? I mean, now we're running out of time here a little bit, Karen. Let me try and focus us a little bit as we wind up, because there are a couple of last things I want to do. You've really stimulated some very interesting thoughts, I'm sure, with a lot of our listeners. Do you have a specific reference that you would recommend that can pull these ideas together that's been influential in your life?
I've done a lot of different studies in general in neuroscience. I've also followed a lot of Tad James. That's where I got my certification in NLP and hypnotherapy with the Tad James Company. I've been a student of Tony Robbins for years, since the early days in the 90s, when he still had his stuff on cassettes. Yeah. I've been a student of personal development, anywhere from Bob Proctor to Stephen Covey and many others.
Well, those I'm going to have all those names listed in the show notes with links. Have you written a book yourself, Karen?
I have co-authored 4 books. They are there's several. One, the first one, which is kind of dear to my heart, was the story of how I've overcome a major head-on collision that had me on disability for a year, and moved out from New York to Arizona to build a thriving practice. That is called Change Your World So You Can Change the World.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
I'm a co-author with Dr. Joe Vitale and Morgana Ray in Ready, Aim, Inspire, which was an international bestseller. I'm also a co-author in another book, which is mostly success stories by women who've been in the wellness and beauty industry, which is Success in Beauty. And one of my longtime dreams was I'm a published author through Chicken Soup for the Soul. So I have a story in Chicken Soup.
Oh, you do? Good for you. That's a very interesting place to aspire to and make it. Yeah, no question about it.
Yeah.
So how can people reach you? In closing, those are some resources that people can use that document your work. How can people reach you directly? What's the easy way to connect with you?
I am all over social media, and to make it easy for everyone, I really just, branded myself under my name. So it's Dr. as in Dr. Karen, Karen, Jacobson, which would be Jacobson. That's my website. That is my Facebook. That is my Twitter link. That is my LinkedIn. That is my Pinterest, my Instagram. And there's some videos and other interviews and some TV stuff on YouTube. And there's a lot of resources there and on the website itself.
It's been so much fun talking to you. This has really been interesting. I'd look forward to another time down the road when we could walk another walk with some other people that you've seen, some issues that have come to the forefront in working with other individuals. It's really very interesting the way you practice, and it is a contrast to the coaching practice.
Well, I would love to thank you again so much for your kindness and for having me on your show, Chuck.
Thank you. Well, we'll do it again sometime, Karen.
Thanks for listening to Core Brain Journal. We're working every day behind the scenes to bring you reports that connect research benches with those street trenches. Here we share the complexity of mind science because, as you know, details really do matter. One of the most pervasive, misunderstood challenges is how commonplace medications, like those written for ADHD, are used so regularly without clear guidelines. If you think you'd like more specifics, take a minute to download my 2-page PDF packed with video links and references on the absolute essentials of how to start ADHD medications. They're easily available at corebrainjournal.com/start. Thanks for listening. Do connect and stay tuned. Together we can make a difference.